Hey, and welcome back to my channel. Since I posted my last video on the prominent Vancouver developer that is seeking creditor protection, I got a lot of questions, not just on YouTube here, but on TikTok as well, in terms of what would happen next in a scenario if you had bought a pre-sale property either through that developer or another developer that's in a similar circumstance. So in today's video, I'm going to answer in general terms what would typically happen, also how you can protect yourself from something like this happening to you. Real quick before we get started, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you in your real estate journey. I also make content to help you make your move in and around Vancouver. So if that sounds interesting to you, hit the subscribe button. Don't miss a future video. Let's get rolling. All right, so if you haven't seen the last video I did, I'm going to link to it here, both in the description and should appear here on the screen as well. Do watch the video, but then hop back here. So again, we can talk about what you can do to protect yourself and what are likely next steps. So the question that came up the most is what would happen to a pre-sale deposit in this scenario had you purchased with a developer that was in this type of a scenario? Now, what I have to preface this with is every pre-sale contract and every pre-sale disclosure statement is different. So I can't answer definitively what would happen in your personal situation. If you're finding yourself in this situation today, the best thing to do is to reach out to your real estate agent and go over your disclosure statement to find out what happens. But what I can tell you is that the way that building works or pre-sales work here in BC is everything is governed by the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, meaning that developers are held to certain rules and responsibilities and certain standards that they must uphold. And one of the rules or criteria that is under that is that your deposit that you have paid on a pre-sale, it does get held in trust at the lawyer's office. When you hear the term in trust, what that essentially means is it's held as a third-party stakeholder. Even if it's held with the developer's lawyer, it's held as a stakeholder, as a third party. So it's not given directly to the developer to spend on funds. This is actually held in trust and it's there to protect you. That way, if there's ever any issues, you could possibly get that deposit back. Now, in what circumstance would you actually get your deposit back? So when we talk about this scenario that's ongoing right now, what the developer is seeking is essentially seeking time right now so they can move forward on projects. And a lot of their projects, like I talked about in the last video, they're not in the construction phase. I think only 2 or 3 were actually in the construction phase. One of them sold like 95% of their units, so that one seems very safe. The other project, which is on Kingsway, I don't think they met their minimum sale criteria. So there's a minimum sale criteria by the lender saying you have to hit a certain amount of units for us to give you the financing. I don't think they hit that amount of units. But long story short, what I think is ultimately going to end up happening is I do think, of course, these projects would move forward because there's already revenue that has been brought in for these projects. Now, what the developer themselves is saying is if they don't get the time to be able to restructure their debt, they may need to actually sell off some of these projects to pay other debt. So long story short, I don't think it's going to be a scenario where people see their deposits back here, but I do think that they will receive their finished product, whether it's still under the same developer or under another developer. That's what's up in the air right now. But if we're talking in general terms about what would happen to a deposit, we have to look at that disclosure statement where, if you've been following my channel, I've harped on it so frequently, but it's such an important document. And the section you want to look at, obviously, is the deposit section. And essentially what this area will tell you is it'll tell you when you would possibly get that deposit back, and essentially when you could back out or walk away from a sale. And I think given in this type of environment we're in, it's even more important to be cognizant of that section of the disclosure statement. So I'll give you an example. Some disclosure statements I'm seeing today are saying that at the year mark, after you've paid your deposit and now the developer is going for their building permit, if they receive the building permit and there are material changes that the developer has to make either to the project or to your unit itself in terms of size, etc., you are often now given the ability to walk away at that point take your deposit back with or without interest and move on to something else. Again, I'm speaking in general terms because every disclosure statement is different, but this is something to watch for. You want to look for, what are my outs with the deposit? How does that look? So again, review your disclosure statement specifically, but generally I'm seeing there are either a couple things that happen at that point. They may even say that when we get the building permit, if for some reason we need to construct either a smaller or a larger size of your unit, they may actually decrease the purchase price of your property or increase it based on the size they're able to build. So this is also something to watch, because if you're not expecting to pay more for your unit, which 99% of people aren't, the developer may actually hold the right to adjust that for you. Now, usually that'll happen if it's a significant change. That could be 8% larger or 8% smaller and above. So it's usually significant, but that's what you want to watch for. You want to see when do I have the ability to walk away, and for what reason, and what do I get back? Do I get my deposit plus interest, or do I just get my deposit? So watch specifically for that section. Now, also on my channel, I've talked very heavily about the outside date, which is in the disclosure statement. And this is basically the deadline, if you will, for a developer to finish the product. The reason why this is so important is that's the amount of time that your deposit could actually get held up. And I've spoken about on this channel how there was a disclosure statement on a project in Kelowna that didn't even have an outside date, and people were waiting years and years to figure out what was going on with the project because it wasn't getting constructed. What I've noticed with this outside date nowadays is they'll have that outside date, but then they're giving the developer the option to extend that for a whole bunch of reasons. Pretty much any reason you could think of. Act of God, fire, explosion, lack of ability to get labor, lack of ability to get the supplies to finish the product. Most of the time what I'm seeing now is the extensions can be for a maximum of a year. But again, every disclosure statement is different. So read the disclosure statement. Look at the outside date. Look if there's an ability for the developer to extend that. And that's how you're going to determine how long your money could get held up in a project that doesn't actually come to fruition. Now, how else can you protect yourself outside of just reading a disclosure statement that's placed in front of you? I mentioned in the last video, I think there's going to be a very heightened focus on which developers people are going to work with in these pre-sale type circumstances. Look, it doesn't need to be a developer necessarily that's been building for 20 or 30 years, but what I always suggest to clients I think is very important is if you can be pointed or directed to a project or multiple projects that developer has actually completed that you could actually go to. So for example, some of these buildings, obviously they may have open houses. Look for a developer that has a track record of completing projects, but also projects that you could actually go and visit and you can see the tangible result of what this developer is doing. It can be pretty risky if you invest in a developer that doesn't have any completed projects, as you might be able to tell. And lastly, to close off this video, I think what we've learned, especially over the last little while here in Vancouver real estate following this story, is how important it is for you to work with your own buyer's agent even when you're buying a pre-sale property. A lot of people think they can just walk into a sales center and negotiate or work out an agreement with the sales center staff. You always got to remember that staff in that sales center, they are there to protect the developer. They're there representing the developer. So even when you're buying pre-sale, get your real estate agent involved. I've had clients actually call me after they've even visited the pre-sale center. They've looked at the units they like, etc. And they literally will say to me, Hassan, I've picked out the unit. I'm pretty sure I know what I like. I want your opinion, but really I want your help navigating that disclosure statement. We have 7 days to rescind and to review. So they'll come to me even after they've viewed a unit, and then they'll come to me for the due diligence portion. So just make sure that whoever it is you trust as a real estate agent, you have them working for you even when it comes to a pre-sale purchase. And finally, you can obviously utilize me if you want to navigate this pre-sale process. It seems daunting for you and you want my help. You can click the Calendly link below to book a time with me, or you can just send me a text or shoot me an email. We can talk one-on-one about it. So guys, if you enjoyed this video or if you learned something, hit the like button. What that does is it takes this video and it sends it out to more people who could also learn from it. And again, if you enjoy this real estate content, you're learning from it, subscribe to this channel and that way you won't miss a future video. But outside of that, guys, I want to thank you so much for taking time to watch this video and have a wonderful day.